Welcome back to Tough Love with Dr. John O'Connor. Today's guest is DJ Ten Hoeve, not only a personal friend of mine, but one of the top realtors in the state of New Jersey. A decade of being his own boss and absolutely just crushing it and rising on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. His discipline, attention to detail, and rituals routines were impressive, and thought he'd be a phenomenal guest to join us today on the podcast.
Thanks,
DJ, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. Nice to be here.
So, DJ, let's jump right into it. One of the things that I love talking about and was looking a little bit into your history was your background as an athlete, former Division I, I believe, Ivy League baseball player.
Yep, Columbia University.
Wonderful. And tell me about that. Tell me about how you picked Columbia, your dad, and the stuff that we kind of talked about offset, and just that experience.
Yeah, so I was an athlete from birth. I mean, I played baseball, basketball, football from the time I can remember, and my dad coached me in every single sport, every single year until I graduated high school. Like, he was a part of the football, high school football team coaching staff. He assisted and helped out at the high school for baseball as well. So I was always around him, and he set a great example. Like, most of my friends still call him coach. So he set like an amazing role model for me as I became a parent and wanted to teach my kids and be involved in the community as well. But when I got to high school, I really had to pick because I was playing football and baseball. And he said to me, look, you could go to college for either one of them. Which one do you want to play? And I loved baseball. I liked football. So for me, it was like, let's do baseball. He was afraid as a pitcher that if I played football as a fullback that I was going to get my arm hammered and that would be the end of it, and then I wouldn't get a scholarship at all. So I dedicated myself to baseball at that point, gave up playing football after freshman year of high school, and then went full bore. And I played basically 12 months a year, went as many places as I could be to be recruited. Got recruited by a bunch of big D1 schools in the Mid-Atlantic, University of Virginia, James Madison, University of Richmond, loved all of them. And then Columbia came out of left field. Like, I didn't think I had the academics to actually get into an Ivy League school. Qualified to get in there, committed early decision, even though I'm not a city boy. Like, Columbia, the city was not my vibe ahead of time, but I was like, this is the best education I'm possibly going to get. I don't care if it's the best baseball school. I got to think long term. So I committed early decision there, and then I had a real big aha that happened after that. A week after I committed early decision, Princeton called me and asked me to play at Princeton.
Wow.
And I couldn't. So it would have been a much better fit for me, but I did my 4 years at Columbia. I ended up stopped playing baseball after freshman year for two reasons. One, the coach that recruited me, and if you got people following this, hopefully you got young kids that are following this too. When you go through your recruiting visits, it's really important to ask, is the coach still going to be there? Like, how long have they been there? What are their plans over the next 5 to 10 years? You don't want to have a coach leave you in the middle of your first or second year. The guy who coached at Columbia for baseball. Was it the head coach? Was the head baseball coach.
Oh,
He was there for 20 years and said, I'm not leaving. He left in July before my freshman year. So I was incoming freshman with a brand new baseball coach who didn't like any of the baseball players who had just been recruited, because if you got rid of them, you'd have a much bigger recruiting class for a second year. So I think out of the 11 of us that got recruited, only 3 or 4 played in their sophomore year.
Sure.
Now, it was partly that, but I also had a recurring bicep tendonitis that just kept coming back and back and back.
Sure.
And that just got aggravated. So
let me jump in. Forget the medical and that. You tied on something which I love, and when you always hear these stories about the parent, the dad, right? And it brings me a lot to my relationship with my son, or even Sean Casey talking about his dad. I love that. Listen to that podcast, and I think I've forced my son to listen to it until his ears have been bleeding. But how was it when the coach left, and that the communication you had with dad? Because being a basketball trainer at the highest level across my career, I know the curse of, like, the kiss of death is when a new coach comes in, they want their guys. Bingo. And you feel it, and you go from being, the golden child, highly recruited, and now all of a sudden you feel like you're the redheaded stepchild. How was that? What was the hardship that came around that? And then how did you get that? How did you communicate with dad when you ultimately stopped playing? Because it sounds like you had a huge relationship, and he was a huge driving force in who you are as an athlete and as a person. Yeah,
I mean, you hit the nail on the head. The incoming coach wanted his people, didn't want any of the people who were there recruited by the previous coach. And to make it even worse, as a pitcher, the pitching coach that he hired was a catcher. Didn't know shit about pitching. This guy had me so screwed up that in the middle of freshman year baseball, I couldn't have a warm-up throw with one of my guys on the right field foul line from 15 feet away and not overthrow him. I was so mind fucked. I was so out of my headspace. I couldn't control everything. He just had me so screwed up mechanically that I couldn't compete anymore. Really messed me up. So between that and the head coach thinking I was a drug addict, like he thought I was an alcoholic and I was into drugs. There had been rumors about the upperclassmen that actually were feeding that to him, and I couldn't be further from that. I was straight edge. Didn't drink, didn't smoke, still never smoked marijuana. And that just fed into this
So that's a lot. That's a lot.
There's a lot of problems.
I never knew this part. So, it's crazy to be an 18-year-old young man. You're there and having our character questioned at that age. We don't really grasp that. Like looking back now, it's probably, I haven't talked about this in quite some time and I can see it in your face. That's a lot.
Yeah.
And that brings, that's that darkness, right? We talk about going in there and as much you love it, then you're sitting there and going, wait, this is beyond baseball.
Yeah.
Like you're calling me out on, this is life stuff.
And I felt really, I shared this stuff with my parents. And my mom was equally as important to my career and my academics as my dad was. But I shared this with him that I really wasn't enjoying it. I wasn't enjoying the college experience. I wasn't enjoying playing baseball. And because my dad had been an athlete who had never been pushed, he was big enough to play in the NFL, fast enough to play in the NFL, but never even pushed to play anything. So after he graduated high school, he took a couple of years off, went to William Patterson for a year, tried out for the Giants, didn't make it, and then that was the end of it. But he obviously looks back and regrets some of the decisions he made. So
from walking away or not having somebody push you, right?
Yeah, I mean, some of it's like, there's a lot of people on the sidelines in youth sports right now that would say that that's living vicariously through your kid, but there's also a lot of validity to that, right? That you've been through it, things that you wish you could have done differently, and you want to share that with the next generation. So I knew that was weighing heavily on me from my dad. So I knew that I wasn't going to come back and play baseball in year 2, probably halfway through the season. And going at the end of the season and just saying, Mom and Dad, hey, by the way, I'm not playing anymore, wouldn't have worked.
Wasn't happening.
Wasn't going to fly.
Got it.
So I realized I needed to have a plan.
Build up that story.
Yeah, legitimately. I started writing a journal. I wrote a journal and saved up letters every couple of days, and I kept them in my dorm. And then at the end of the season, I mailed them home to Mom and Dad. And then when I came home from the season, I was like, "Oh shit, this is going to be bad."
Okay.
And it was a bomb.
Yeah.
It was a bomb that dropped. Dad wanted me to play one more summer season to see if it was really still
it out,
in me.
see if it was just motion and grow through it.
And I burned out. It was just the end of it. I just realized I was done.
It sounded like the culture, and that's one thing. I just dropped my son off, as you know, at IMG to play baseball, and it's amazing. Not only is he my oldest, and I've had so many parents, commiserate to make me feel better because I dropped him off in the middle of a hurricane down there, right? So I feel like dad of the year. But it's funny when you take them out of there, and the new head coach or the coach that we met down there, who went down and tried out, is a wonderful guy.
Yeah.
A little bit older, but just a maverick, a warrior, like that old school kindness, but firm leadership. And
it's a role model.
Role model. And I told my son, I said, the competition is always going to be you versus you. I don't look at anybody if they're Goliaths and they're doing a post-grad year, unless they were sent there, question that, right? Because chances are, I'm going to tell you in basketball, if I got a 6'9" kid that's got a motor and he shows up in prep school, unless he's academic and eligible or something like that, chances are he's got holes in his game, right? We knew we were giving you this opportunity to get somewhere and elevate yourself and really rise above what, the labels that we get, right? Like you got labeled at Columbia. Yeah. And I was like, Jay, you know what? It's bigger than sports. It's beyond baseball. You're going to go there and you want to understand what makes you tick, what made you tick, right? And I said, and if you walk away and you become a student next year and you just go, just like we were there yesterday, and literally in front of us is Tracy McGrady and his son.
Right.
And like 4 up is some, I'm not a golf fan, but there was a professional golfer with their kid. And then 5 up was a professional baseball player. And he's like, Dad, I go, John, it's not about living vicariously. It's about putting you in an environment so that you get to see that these people want you to understand foot on the gas, right? And if you walk around in the modern things, and I chuckle when he says, like, if I'm giving him a hard time on a text, he'll text back saying, "You don't want this smoke," and I laugh, and I had to Google that to see what that meant, and but it was pretty funny. But the reality is, I wanted him to build that toughness, and I think that you're journaling and you're way ahead of your time on journaling as a college freshman, but you got it off your chest.
Yeah, and I mean, the worst that happens to him, right? Talking about your son is even if that doesn't get him to play pro sports or whatever he's hoping the best case scenario is, the bottom end of what the worst case scenario is still better than where he is right now, right? You fail forward. He's going to learn so much about himself. He's going to make relationships. He's going to learn how to network. He's going to learn how to carry himself as a man. There's so much he's going to get out of that, which is what I look back on from college as well. I say to people all the time, pivoting a little bit here, I'm in real estate, and I'm the most overeducated real estate agent in history, being an Ivy League graduate and doing a job all you need is a GED for.
Sure.
But I wouldn't be the same person I am in business had I not gone through what I did in college.
Sure. Well, it makes and I love that. It's funny. I think a lot of the modern social media world pushes to go away from school. But I think there's something to be said about interaction. and going there. I mean, just that little blurb you gave me in about a minute and a half about teammates going to assassinate your character assassination, or coaches that are supposed to be your mentors, and people that when you're an athlete, we look at coaches as like father figures, right? And, I think that, like I said to him, I was like, John, what resonates with me here, and he goes by Johnny. I said, what resonates here, son, is every day you need to make that mark and say, I'm going to draw that line and I'm going to challenge me. And I love that you're going there with this Ivy League attitude. But the reality is that you just outwork everybody. That's it. And, and at the end of the day, when you roll up your sleeves, and that's one thing that I love having you on the podcast today, is you're a grinder. And no I've run into a lot of people that would say, they put their noses up. They take that approach that I don't need to outwork them. I'm the smartest person in the room. But I think when there's a balance, when you could be the smartest person in the room and you outwork everybody, that's a whole different kind of weapon, right?
And that's yes, it's learned, but I think that's instilled in you at a very young age. And that's what I really owe everything to my parents about, is they just showed me work harder than everybody else. I grew up in a family-owned construction business where my mom and dad worked together. I got to see what hard work looked like.
Sure.
My dad was doing estimates until 8:30 at night. We didn't eat dinner until 9 o'clock at night. I saw how hard work paid off, and being a man of your word or a woman of your word and standing
integrity,
up for
right? Integrity challenge. I love that. And you made a post about your dad, and I think it was his retirement post.
Yep.
And to me, I love drawing on that stuff. I love seeing the connection. I think it's like, it's family. It's your business becomes your family, and then God and everything around that, your sports and everything. And I could tell right away, and it made my heart smile having you on here today, because I said, this is a guy that loves his mom and dad.
For sure.
And this is a guy that when he's writing these words and were well written, it touched me like you were, celebrating a lifetime of construction, town involvement. And you earlier mentioned that your friends that are in their 40s, younger, they're maybe possibly 50s now. And the reality is they still call him coach.
Absolutely.
And to him, kudos to him for a job well done. And, and I think that, again, when we talk about parents that are grinders, right, it's so important to take a second to remind them. And I'm sure you catch yourself with your kids now, you're a second generation grinder, touching real estate or construction. And, they need to appreciate that. So I don't really think it matters what you do in you be successful in anything, like you said, with real estate in a top 1%er. And, what I do in chiropractic, and physical medicine,
right.
I think it's about them understanding, hey, listen, my guys, whatever you're going to do, 1,000%.
They can't just hear it though. They have to see it. Right. And that's something I thought really hard about and felt bad about in my first, 6 to 8 years of being in real estate was I took phone calls at the dinner table. I would leave family vacations to go back and meet people to go show houses. And I felt really bad about that. But the great thing that comes from that is my kids see work ethic. They know when dad was taking that phone call, that was the reason why we were able to go on vacation.
Sure.
When dad's going to show that client, that's the reason why we were able to buy another investment property that might turn into one of their down payments on their house in the future. So whether they get into real estate or not, I feel like watching, and it's not just me, right? I'm in a family business that my wife and I operate together.
Sure.
She is my better half. The kids being able to see that on a day in and day out basis, I know, regardless of what they go into, they know what hard work looks like.
That's awesome. And so tell me about this. We're talking about work. We're talking about family. How do we balance that? What's your rituals, routines? I know you picked up on that online trainer. We were talking about that when we were working on an elbow or something on you. What do you do to stay hungry? Because again, your background in sports and, what keeps you, to burn off the work stress, to burn that off and get going. Tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah. So for me, that was probably the hardest transition of coming out of competitive athletics in college. And then I got into medical sales, did that for about 10 years and then transitioned into my own business. Those overlapped for a while. I was doing real estate part-time until I launched the business full-time for me. But trying to find that outlet for competition was huge. And it comes down to two things. Real estate is a super competitive sport as long as you make it that. So for me, I turned it into a competition, not against other people, but against myself. And then physically, I really refocused my health after, probably about 4 or 5 years ago. I stopped playing baseball when I was 20 years old. I didn't pick it up again until I was 37. I tried to go back at it like I was a 21-year-old kid, and that didn't work.
Didn't work out well for you.
No, didn't work. Tore an oblique, tore my hamstring, had left wrist tendonitis, right bicep tendonitis. And I was like, after a year, I was like, okay, I'm going to hang it
Shelf
up.
this.
I've only got so much free time. What am I going to do to enjoy myself as a hobby outside of work? And for me, the main thing that is my release is surfing.
Okay.
So like this morning I was in the water. We've got a hurricane swell coming up the East Coast. I'm not the best surfer out there, but I've been doing it for 15 years and I really love it. And it's the only place for me where the phone doesn't ring. So this is part of what people need to figure out is what is it that gives you a release, but also where is your place of refuge?
It's kind of like your meditation zone, if you will.
Yeah. The phone doesn't ring while I'm out there. I can handle everything when I come back in, and I'm a better dad. I'm a better human. I'm a better husband when I'm in the water, and I come back in and I feel refreshed.
Awesome. So tell me this. I love that. Do you have anything that you do? So you have the surfing, you do the working out thing. Is there any meditation? Is there anything like that? Are you journal? I mean, we know we talked about journaling when you were getting out of baseball. Is there anything else you kind of put down as far as like listing your like Power 5, what you want to accomplish, like daily routines? Tell the audience about that.
Yeah. So I usually am a 5 a.m. workout guy, wake up, get it out of the way, be done in the morning. Then I get to take my kids to school and have personal time with them, which is huge. Usually on my way to the office, I'm listening to meditations. So for me, affirmations, which I did not believe in for the longest time. I was
when did that start?
This is some airy-fairy shit.
Sure.
And I'm not going to do it. And about 3 years ago, my business coach got me hooked on it. And for me, it's Ray Lewis. That's the one that motivates me the most. Listen to his affirmations for greatness.
Yeah. Well, if Ray Lewis doesn't get you going, you might be catatonic.
So yeah, I mean, I listen to that every morning on the way to work. And then, you know, work for me is a very unpredictable schedule just by nature of what real estate is. And I'm thankful enough that I'm 15 years in the business now. So my schedule is a little bit less unpredictable. And I have other people on the team that can help me sort of leverage some of those things out. But I also do a time audit during the day. So I'm keeping track of what I'm doing in 15-minute increments so that at the end of the week or the end of the month, I can look at this and go, what is the stuff that for me is not dollar producing activities here?
And get rid of it.
And how can I leverage that stuff out to somebody else who maybe that's in their 80% and what they're great at, and I can go grow the business even more.
Now, was that a business coach thing?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like that. That sounds like a Brendan Bouchard moment.
Yeah.
So
that's mainly what it is. But for me, I love reading, but I don't love physically reading. So I'll fall asleep. I'll get one page done laying in bed and then I'll crash out. So for me, every minute I'm in the car, I'm reading audiobooks.
Yeah, same.
And I try to crush about 15 a year if I can at minimum.
Sure. I like that. So one of the things, and obviously to celebrate you, and whenever you have a guest on the show that's as successful as yourself, COVID, as it was obviously, you know, horrible for a lot of people, you know, and for us in healthcare, you know, it was devastating, right? Yeah. Because a lot of ours were rehab fitness centers. So we could have one location open, but one had to be closed. It was a lot of pivoting. You seem to have really flourished during that time. And again, I'm always proud to celebrate friends and there. Tell me about how you approached that and you turned what could have been horrible for a lot of people that kind of closed their doors and looked to do something else. It looked like you exploded. Tell me about that and how you turned that into a huge opportunity and growth.
First of all, I just have to say how fortunate I am, and everyone who's in the real estate business, how fortunate we are that turned the way that it did, right? Because I'm sitting there in March when the shutdown happens, and I literally sit down with my wife and go, this might be it. This might be the end of our business. We might need to go pivot and find an entirely different career, which is crazy, right? We are producing $150 million in volume at that point. We're a team of 6 people. We're ranked in the top in the country, and I'm still thinking that this is going to fall off a cliff and I might be out of business. Obviously, that didn't turn out that way. By May, everything opened up, at least for us as essential workers. And with the massive amounts of people diving out of New York City because of wanting to get out of vertical living and needing space, our business here in New Jersey really did really well. But at the same time, it was a conscious effort, right? Everybody in our business, most people in our business woke up as soon as the lockdown happened and we're like, all right, it's sweats and yoga pants day and I don't have to do anything. I'll just wait till somebody comes along and says, hey, I want to buy or sell a house. We didn't take that. We have a team of people that we need to make sure we're helping support their lifestyle and having them create lives by design. So what we did is we're like, day one, every day, it's a Zoom call. 8 o'clock in the morning. Every day there's a Zoom call at 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the afternoon, and it's a wrap up. We needed to keep everybody laser focused on doing what they had to do. And that was why we picked up massive amounts of market share in the first 5 or 6 months of COVID, that when everybody else was asleep,
wine sales went up. You guys were still grinding.
We were scooping up whatever fish were jumping out of the water at that point. Now it's also been really hard, right? So as much as values have gone up since COVID, the number of transactions is shrinking by half every single year because there's no inventory. So if you look at a lot of real estate agents, I mean, you go up to somebody and you're like, oh man, you must be killing it in real estate. There's a lot of people dying in real estate over the last 2 or 3 years because there's fewer transactions and twice the number of realtors doing it. So it really comes down to you need to take market share. Yes. You need to get your unfair share of business. And for us, that's just been grinding. It's just go out there and work harder.
Your social media has been fantastic. And so we were just talking about that off camera. Do you feel like that's it, or are you doing like the boots on the ground meet and greets, or is it a little bit of an amalgamation, combination of both?
The social media thing hasn't really hit for me. I think we've been at this 3.5 years. I'm starting to get some traction for it, which is also just that's an example of how hard I'm willing to work at something. Sure. And I'm willing to run into a wall for 3 years and spend money. But I think it's just also a testament to the fact that we had been in business for 15 or 16 years. And a lot of the people who had done business with us were looking to buy and sell over again. So we had the turnover.
Yeah, sure.
And then the reason why we've been successful building in the first place is we don't let a lead fall through. Somebody raises their hand and wants to do something with us, that person's going to hear from us until they either die or say that they don't want to do business.
Go away.
Which is, it sounds ridiculous, but so many real estate agents, the reason why they're not successful is Rejection. They don't call people back, or they're not willing to work harder when the person says no in the first place.
Okay.
So it's pick up the phone call, be in the right place, and you create your own luck.
I love that. So let's run with that for a little bit. So it sounds like how you coach as the lead dog with your wife, you tell them it's not rejection. It's pivot. It's go at them. Tell us if you were giving somebody like, a one pager on how you turn like a no into that. Cause I don't care whether it's a recruiting process. I don't care whether it's a job, here it is selling somebody's house. And a lot of people's house is most of their retirement, most of their equity, or it's their life. They're going to raise their children, their husband, their wife, whatever. There's a lot of emotion that goes into that. Tell me about the coaching that you guys went into that. Cause I think most people run into the self-help space where they're like, they hear no and they shut down. So tell me about that. I love that because I think that's probably the most powerful thing we touched on other than your parents, but tell me about that because I think that's huge.
Yeah. So the funny thing is I never saw myself as a salesperson. I remember being in college and being in class with my roommate, who was also the catcher for the baseball team and is still one of my closest friends. And he always had the gift of gab. Like he could schmooze himself into any situation. I remember at the end of this class, he went up and he had talked to the professor. And from my perspective, and it might not be true, but it's what I remember in my head, he talked the professor into giving him a better grade. And I remember being furious about it. I was like, it should just be objective. It should be whatever you got, what you got. Because I was never going to go and schmooze somebody.
Yeah, your mouth didn't work that way.
Yeah. And then when I got into medical sales, which was also weird for me because I didn't think of myself as a salesperson, I found myself over a course of an 8-year period finding my way of selling.
Okay.
And that was, if you follow Tony Robbins and disc profiling, I'm a C personality. So I'm a super detail-oriented individual. For me, what makes me feel confident is making sure I've got all my details so I can walk in and feel like I'm strapped up, I've got armor on, and I know the situation. So for me, when I train people on our team, I tell them the same thing is, you got to understand your personality style, first of all.
Sure.
But if you can arm yourself with as much technical skill as you can before you walk in there, you're going to feel good. Because so much of this is not about walking in with more information. It's walking in with swagger. If you walk in with the swagger, people can smell it and feel it on you.
Sure.
If you
but
walk
not
in
sticky.
There,
yeah. Not sticky. Yeah.
Not sticky. But if you walk in there feeling like, I don't know if I deserve to be here, I don't know if I have all the answers, they might hire the other person, it stinks on you. And people are going to read that, and you're not going to get the opportunity just because of not necessarily what you said, but how you said it. So a big part of us training people is that we put people through the ringer with our training program. So it's a 12-week training program. In the first 8 weeks, it's intense. And we say it's like Navy SEAL training. It's like Bud's training for real estate agents.
Love it.
At the end of 8 weeks, they have to use me as an actual real estate client and walk me through a mock buyer situation, all the way from me calling in like, hey, Jane, by the way, next week, you've passed week 8. I'm going to call you as if I'm John from Milwaukee and I want to buy a house in New Jersey. You need to take me through every single step up to an accepted offer, including showing me houses. So now they're put in a high pressure situation with someone who knows what's right and knows what's wrong. That's a really stressful situation for them to do. But they know when they come back out the back end of that if they can do it with me, the customer's never going to know what they did wrong.
Sure.
So it not only makes me confident that they're going to be able to handle a client I give to them, but they feel confident enough that they're not going to fuck it up.
So not only is it a coachable moment for them, but do you feel like, I love that approach because my feeling is like, when you're actively coaching or participating, you're also learning. Mm-hmm. So do you feel like while you're in that experience?
I get better every time.
Absolutely.
And I kind of stole this. I mean, Army and military has a similar model as well, but I stole this from physician modeling. So they do see one, do one, teach one, which is kind of the same thing we're modeling in our business, which is you're going to mentor with somebody else, watch them do it 2 or 3 times. Then you're going to do it with them watching you or me watching you. And then on the back end of that, they're going to oversee somebody else coming through training.
Love it. So one of the things, and it kind of draws some similarities with our programs, which you were experienced with the Shockwave, we're huge on education versus sales. And to the point where what I realized, like as a promoter personality for me, and I'm a big Tony Robbins, I love Ed Milet, I shift between those two going back and forth. Yeah. And one of the things that I realized is that when we got into this in healthcare, we're selling services. And I told my core team, and now we're in 3 locations going on a 4th location and looking to expand outside of the state. And I realized, I'm like, hey guys, we're going to reproduce this. This system needs to be like that. But, like you said, generating sales, but it needs to be that every team member moves like fingers on the hand.
It's hard.
It's a struggle. And sometimes it's such a balance because you're like, wait a minute, am I the number one producer or am I the number one coach? Because it's hard to be both, right? And I think that balance is we keep going back to education over the sales because they're like, hey, you see, because we have now the national brands are coming at us, with the amazing, concept of podcasts and what we do on social media. And, we hammer social media, and it hasn't been really great for us until this past year. And now it's ridiculous. Yeah. Now we have the brands coming at us saying, we want you to exclusively be the brand ambassador. And when they started asking us questions, I almost felt bad. I laughed because Christian and Matt will be sitting there because and this from being formerly in medical device sales. I go, hey, look, I don't want to be difficult. But let me just start by saying, you guys kind of sell the product to us as the healthcare provider and leave it on our door like the stork and the baby. And you're like, peace out. Right. And then those devices sell. And whether it's like, the cool sculpting and bariatric guys are using or this or that, I'm the in-between. I want to come in and be the SEAL that trains the SEALs. Yeah. And, and when I roll in, I'm like, hey guys, you have amazing equipment. Oh, and whatever that device is, you have amazing houses to sell. But the reality is if you cannot communicate and recognize that personality and how you're going to communicate and be over-prepared with education, the minute it turns salesy or sticky, the person, and I tell people this all the time, I go, guys, I don't care if we see thousands of people a month. Patient number 1 only cares about patient number 1. That's it. Okay. Unless they're related to patient number 2. And maybe that's a 50-50. And I think once we evolve to that, and this has been something over a year, I mean, I'm 20 plus years in healthcare, and I was blown away, Deej. I have to tell you that like when we started that, I watched my provider assistants, my providers, and now they're kind of buying into it. I'm like, guys, it makes you a better healthcare provider. Yeah. Because if the person's struggling with a chronic biceps tendinopathy, back pain, whatever that is, even personal, mental, physical, when you can give them a reproducible system and coach it and go back to it, then it's like the difference between I hand you a fish or I teach you how to fish, right?
That's a hard thing, I'm sure, for you to do like it is for me. I mean, I'm still the lion's share of the production of our team, and it can't be that way sustainably, right? As you try to grow and scale a business just like you're doing as well, you have to at some point leverage yourself out to be able to generate business for the business, but not be the person who's actually there running lasers all the time because you've got higher dollar producing activities. So it's hard to be able to teach other people to do it exactly like you do it when the easy thing is just give me the fucking laser. I'm going to go in there and do it.
Do it. Yeah.
But you can't. That's not how you build a successful business. But when you can train people to think like you think, and what you're saying is the same way we approach it, which is don't worry about the sale. Worry about treating what the person actually needs. Make sure they get a phenomenal experience.
And listen,
the business will come if they have a phenomenal experience.
Tell me this. Obviously, healthcare, we love patient testimonials. Is that something that's big? Like, tell me that feeling. I mean, obviously, a first home or selling someone's first home when they're transitioning to they're becoming snowbirds of this. Yeah. Tell me about that because it's got to be pretty special. And how do you guys, because I feel like that could be a huge practice growth thing for you guys at Ten Hoeve Realty. Tell me what makes you special about that, like the engaging with the humanity side of it, like making them feel special.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's very customary for the end of a real estate transaction, your realtor buys you a bottle of champagne or a picture of the house. We try to focus on something that's actually important to that client. And the way we do that is by listening to them over the course of the transaction. So if you've never read the book, oh my gosh, I'm going to forget
John
this.
Maxwell?
No, it's hospitality book. I'll remember the name of it, and you should definitely plug it here in the podcast. But Unreasonable Hospitality, that's the name of it. Read that book. It's unbelievable. They talk about 30 Madison, the restaurant in New York City, and what they did when the two guys were still there running the business together to pay attention to their customers. And one of the things they talk about in the book was they have these 4 people that come in. They're from out of the country, and they're in New York City for a week, and they're going to try all the best restaurants in New York City. So they're there at the table, and the waiter overhears the one thing they didn't try in New York City that they wish they had was a dirty water dog.
Okay.
The maitre d' goes out, gets a dirty water dog, brings it back into the kitchen, cuts it up, and they serve it on a plate to this table. And it was the best experience they had. Not that it was the greatest food, but the fact that that person paid attention to them and completed what they wanted coming out of their trip of New York. They obviously will go back to that restaurant forever, and you get amazing reviews from it. So we try to do the same thing in our business, which is listen to that client, deliver on the results they want the whole way through. Obviously, we give them something special at the end of it, which is relevant to what their transaction's been about.
Personalize the
something
gift.
personal.
It's not generic.
But a big part of being a real estate agent and a great realtor is being a therapist. I mean, people don't
Tell
realize.
me about that. What does that mean?
It's very different for commercial real estate, right? Commercial real estate, you're buying an asset or you're renting an asset, and it's a 7-year transaction, and it's, there's not a whole lot of emotion in it. It's part of what the great thing about being a commercial broker is, not like me, is that they work 9 to 5. Nobody takes phone calls after 5 o'clock. Nobody's arguing over microwaves, which in my business happens every single day because it's where your home is. It's where you've made memories with your kids, and you don't want to let go of that place because it's not just a business transaction as much as it should be.
Yeah.
So we have to manage competing interests on the buyer and seller side. We've got to manage different personalities of attorneys. We've got to manage a husband and wife who probably don't want the same things. Like the guy probably wants a basement for his man cave. She probably wants to have a bigger master bedroom where she has a tub. So making sure you manage all those expectations for people and get them across the finish line in a way where everybody feels happy is really challenging. But that's what I love about it, because every single deal is different. And at the end of the day, you can make somebody really, really happy that they come back to you in 2 or 3 years and go, I'm glad I listened to you, because if I hadn't bought at that point and COVID had hit, I'd still not be in a house.
So I think I'm going to change the heading here to DJ Ten Hoeve, top realtor and therapist. Actually.
Yeah,
I like that.
And hostage negotiator.
I like that. So, all right. So love where this the podcast is going today. Let's touch on, we talked about that. I think you said like it's a high percentage, over 75% that you're potentially generating. Talk about the evolution where you see yourself in 6 months. You're managing minutes, and it sounds like you have a great business coach just keeping you on track. Yep. What's your 6 month, 12 month? What's on the forefront for you moving forward? What's the plan? What's the goal?
So I'm going to plan it out even a little farther than that. So my wife and I want to be in San Diego, specifically Encinitas or Cardiff. Okay. By the time the kids are in college. So I've got a freshman in high school and a sophomore in high school. So realistically, I've got 4 years if I make this happen the way that I want to be out there. But I'm not walking away from the business here, which a lot of people are like, well, you just spent 16 years building a business here. Why would you pick up and leave? The great thing about our business is I can still manage the business here from California, but there's a lot that has to happen in 4 years for me to be able to be in California and still have the team here growing and crushing scaling business the way it is. And that's going to involve me stepping out of a lot of the duties that I do as a producer.
Okay.
I have to be able to grow my agents that are on the team right now into my replacements. And that involves that means I have to train them to think like me. They have to have the presence that I do. They have to be able to generate business the way that I do. And that means they've got to come along and tag along with me and see what I do every single day.
Got it. More boss time. That could go either way, right?
It could go either way. But I mean, we've selected great people that are on the team. I don't ever want to see anybody that we've hired in the business leave. And I think that although we keep bringing new people in, and there will be opportunities that come from them, I want the people who are my OGs that are here for 3, 4, 5 years. I want them to pick up where I left off and be able to hand that part of the business to them when I'm in California.
Well, I'm amazed with your growth. And it said you had 6 that were with you. Is the majority of those, that crew still with you from COVID?
So yeah, from COVID, we really only had, it was probably 4 at that point. My cousin AJ's in our business, Nikki, me, Sabrina was with us, and we've had a couple changes since then, but Cree was with us as well. So she joined us. This is one of the coolest things I think is a compliment to our business and a compliment more than anything is 3 people who are on my team as realtors are people who were clients of ours before they became real estate agents. We hire people generally who have no real estate background. I want to train you from the ground up.
Okay.
But if somebody had a good enough experience that they're like, hey, I think I'm getting into real estate, I want to work for you, that's a huge compliment to me. So I really hang my hat on that. But yeah, we've grown significantly over the past couple of years. Now we're 10 people deep, where we were really 4.5 people up until 2 years ago. So we're scaling at this point. We've got our systems and procedures, and now we're just layering on top.
I love that. We kind of started a similar thing. I sat in a credentialing or a CE, continuing education seminar a few years back, and a very impressive speaker. I believe she was from Canada, in like 14 different businesses, a chiropractor, owns multiple locations out west and touches everything. But it was funny. She said the same thing you said. And I started doing that with my team, is getting people outside of healthcare, but look for like-minded people that are hungry, ambitious, integrity based and dignity. Yep. Hear the stories, like both of my guys here when that are with me pretty much everywhere I go. One of the stories I loved was one of my guys. They do a golf tournament fundraiser, and always with the parents, right? And hearing it, and I can see in their face that they don't realize as a dad, but I'm looking at him as a dad at that point, and I can see the young version of him being happy that when he was in grammar school or high school, this thing's going on. and whether it was the beer run, and they're going this and that, or they're playing golf with all the cousins and family, it touches you, right? Yeah. And then my other guy, again, same thing, impressive, talking about the work ethic of his family. And when I hear that, and I met them, I was sitting there thinking about bringing me back to my family roots, and that how I measured success back then was they were just grinders.
Yeah.
Right. It was 7 days a week. If there was a side hustle on the weekend to pick up a tree job or this or that, there was never a no. And no matter how sore you were or how bad the weather was, it was, hey, it's your job to take care of your family.
I think that's a message that has to get out to the younger generation too, right? There's so many kids that are going the traditional college route, which is cool. But so many people graduate at that point and are like, I don't know what I want to do.
Yeah.
I want to go start a business. And they think that the first business they start and it fails, like that's the end of it. I got to hang it up. It's over. I don't think enough people realize how many of us that are entrepreneurs fell into this.
Sure.
Or did it as a side hustle and just outworked everything until you didn't have to do your primary career anymore, and this became your primary career. There's a tremendous number of people just in our little Colts Neck area here that I think if we could mentor other young kids to come to us and ask your questions, you're like, tag along with Doc for the day and see what he does and ask him how he ended up where he did. You're not going to listen to your dad. Your dad might have just as successful a story, but no one listens to dad, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think there's so much that guys like you and I can afford and offer to young kids that are coming up through high school and college and just out of college, that we need to do more to give back to make sure those kids have a place where they can ask those questions before they end up in a career that they hate.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny, I can tie into that with the 20 years of being a professional basketball trainer and watching these kids attend ridiculous universities and coming out absolutely clueless because in their head, they were so, one focus,
blinders.
One goal, blinders on. And I was intrigued because I was looking at them like, whether it was MIT or, an Ivy League school. I had one that was he was always a beast. And I kind of reminded my son of this. I go, this was a kid that was a small kid, and he always had a chip on his shoulder, and he wound up he grew in college and got to, whatever it is, 6'1", and impressive the whole way through. And the thing about it was funny was I didn't mind whether, some kids would say it was arrogant or chip. I go, you know what? He's just a good athlete.
Yeah.
And he was always slighted for being little or being this or being that and being classified, getting a tag on you. Right. And looking back at it, I'm like, here's a kid that owns a 7-digit or 8-digit company now that graduated. He took a shot. He didn't get into the school he wanted, did the prep school or PG route, right? And gets into the school. After, by the way, and his list that he got into for everybody else, like you're talking about Princeton and Columbia, was ridiculous. And everybody would say, oh, I would have gone to any of the schools he deferred and, or, he turned down. And the reality is that what you learn is that that's the exception.
Yeah.
The majority, they're in there and they're coming out of Virginia, they're coming out of here, they're coming out of there, and they have no idea what to do.
No.
And I agree. I think the mentoring or asking questions, I love it now. And I think you're probably we're at that age now where I probably get 5 texts a week from parents that are like, we love what you do.
Yep.
Like we love that, how you grind and like you pivot and you're constantly evolving with the business. And I say, it's a couple reasons. I get bored, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I want to stimulate, offer a great product, but I get bored because of not having, like we talked about earlier, like, for you, it was surfing. For me, it was the basketball training that I could compete against these elite athletes that hold records at schools like Duke and all-time scorer, national player of the year. And it made me feel relevant and young.
Yeah.
And when that went away, I was like, hey, you know what? Now let me be Doc, the coach,
right?
Not the trainer, but to say, hey, listen, DJ's son wants to come in and learn about physical medicine. I may say, hey, listen, and he'll go home and say, Dad, he told me not to be a chiropractor, to do this or whatever, but inspired me. He said, but I loved it.
Yep.
I love the fact that it wasn't so much he was saying away from it. It's that he said, I think your personality be there. Don't close that door. Go through that door and check it out. You know what? You may find something. You can always come back here. My door's always going to be open. I'll mentor you as long as you want. But I think the biggest thing that we can teach these kids and today's generation, especially, I think we can agree, these young kids, that 2 years in COVID during that developmental time was unbelievably destructive for a lot of, for young kids. And I think watching just my kids alone, I saw with my daughter, she, went away from sports and now coming back to it and, self-motivated, which makes me so happy because I think the biggest thing that we know as players and now as business owners is those that are self-motivated will win at whatever they're in. When you have to motivate people, there's one thing when they may be insecure, but they have it in them. I'm okay with that. But if you got to motivate them to show up, that's a whole different kind of thing. And those people will burn out.
That's work and it's work and athletics. It doesn't matter. If you have that personality style where you're not a self-motivator, and when you get punched in the mouth, you're just going to back down, that shows itself in our training program really quickly, and those people usually self-select out of the business.
I got to bring the Ray Lewis thing up because I absolutely adore him. And, when I was in Atlanta, he was a big name down there. It happened to be his probably most infamous thing that happened around his career other than his illustrious pro career.
Right.
But tell me what's his things. I love the lion thing. I love this. Like, tell me one of his podcasts or one of his motivational things you jump on that you feel is just straight fire, that you come into the office and they're like, oh boy, he was listening to Ray Lewis today.
I mean, it's the same one I listen to over and over again. I don't need to listen to different ones. It's Affirmations for Greatness. It's the same one I listen to. I get in my car, Spotify's already hooked up, ready to roll. And it's literally a minute and a half. But
oh, got it.
There's portions of it that really resonate with me, whether you're religious or not, and I'm not, is a river of compassion washes away my hatred and fear. And that's huge to me because there's a lot of times as a competitor, things go wrong in my business, or I don't get a listing that I thought I deserved, or I'm up against somebody else. And I have new agents that come in and they're like, I lost this opportunity, or the person didn't hire me. And I tell them, it doesn't ever get any easier. Like, I'm doing this 16 years. It still sucks every time it happens. You just learn to forget it a lot faster the longer you've been doing it, because your pipeline's full enough that you can let that one go and focus on something else. But for me, that affirmation is huge for me because I go from being angry at the situation to going, I need to be better.
What I learned from that. Yeah. Coachable moment, right? What'd you learn from it?
That's not their fault. That wasn't the person didn't hire me because they liked the other person better. It was, I didn't show up enough. What could I have done better so that the next time I will get that opportunity? And some people read that wrong, right? So I've put things on social media when situations like that have happened to me. And I said, when I lost an opportunity, I said, I'm coming for you in an Instagram post. And the person who ended up getting that opportunity called me months later and was threatened, thought I was physically going to find this person and hurt them. I was like, that had nothing to do with you. When I said I'm coming for you, it was me. I'm coming for me. Like, the better version of me is going to show up. That's all it was.
I love it. It's funny. That's probably the biggest thing when I look at my rituals, routines that translate to my office. When I have a bad or a subpar experience or interaction, it never gets easier. And one of my mentors and a good friend of mine told me, actually two, and one has since passed, and a wonderful man. But they both said, because I remember saying as a young practitioner, hey, how do you deal with when someone's not getting better, or they don't like your style, your technique? And they both did the same thing.
Yeah.
It never gets easier.
No.
But what I learned is when I do everything right to my standard, and I hold myself to a very high standard, I'm like, hey, I'm going to look at it again. I want to be 99.9%. I couldn't have done everything possible. Like you said, with regards to the guy going out and getting the dirty dog or whatever you called it, and serving it up. And it's not even something in his restaurant. It's how can we have made that experience better? How can we have touched that personality better to get to the point where we can offer healthcare? Because a lot of times, when it doesn't go well in that consultation, the examination or whatever, it's usually because you're not picking up the signs and signals of what they're saying. And it's usually, as I always cite my guy, Rob Gill, that you noted on the text the other day, is he's big on listening. He's a huge Tony Robbins disciple. He's in that whole circle. And I will say that that's probably the biggest game changer that I tell every one of my providers or provider assistants or my coordinators. I'm like, hey, starts with listening.
Yep.
You must be a compassionate listener. I don't care if you're hungry. I don't care if you're tired. Somebody's calling in pain, and look, it could be like in your industry, right? Somebody's calling because they're getting divorced. Somebody's calling because the spouse died. It was very sad. We moved in on our block. We had two beautiful properties go because both spouses died.
Yep.
And they didn't want to maintain the property, or too much emotion, like too many memories in the hallways. And I think that that's probably been the biggest game changer for us, that I'm like, hey guys, our cultural moments are going to happen over and over and over again. We have to listen. We have to sit there and go back to it. Let's try to role play it again and just stop for a second. And what I find myself doing now is I go back into the exam with the patient and kind of weirds them out. I'll regurgitate the entire conversation and they're like, you didn't write anything down. I said, you know what? You've paid for my time.
Yeah.
And to me, that is the greatest compliment you could pay for me, other than a testimonial after I've gotten you better or got you where you want to go. But the reality is I owe that to you.
Yeah.
And, and that resonates to them to the point where they're like,
But you can't do that unless you're actively listening, which is very different from hearing, right?
Correct.
So many people, they're talking in a conversation. They're not actually listening. They're waiting to get their next word in, and their brain's firing about how they're going to hit the ping pong ball across the table.
Correct.
If you shut this down and truly focus with the person you're listening to, you hear that person, you listen to them, you can regurgitate the whole conversation.
It was funny. I was listening to that, and I was listening to a podcast the other day, my morning routines, and it was so funny that one of, top 1%ers in the podcast space was like, if I like the person and I'm going to take them on a business, even a coaching client, but I can tell they're in that ping pong mode, just trying to go, but I know because they're an untrained listener, I'll get past it. Mm-hmm. But if I can tell they truly don't care and they're just trying to get their point out, or they didn't even let me get my question out, they're already moving. He's already moved on.
Yeah.
And it's amazing because to me, that's a skill, and it's something that I've been really working on, because I'm like, sometimes I'll get patients, and we've kind of stopped because I found the patient that's a chronic seeker, that I feel like they don't really want to get rid of their pain. They just love bouncing from spot to spot to spot.
Yeah.
And to me, at this stage of my career, I'm like, it's not about the money. It's about helping people and feeling good that you go to the end of the day and you say, you know what? We genuinely helped, our entire patient population was with us today and felt good about it.
Yeah.
And I will say it was actually pretty funny today. I think that one of our patients came in, the father and spouse was a surgeon. He was doing a procedure, and the wife was asking a ton of questions about what we do. And the fantastic thing about it was, I literally, I'm always referencing or citing, National Institute of Health or the Mayo Clinic or HSS or wherever, the top where everybody's going to go, especially being in the Northeast, where they're looking, where they're going. And she said, but what if we need surgery? I said, it's a great question. It should be the last resort, right? And she had already went to, and baseball guys. I mean, this Dr. Ahmad is absolutely a beast. He's going to be, in a few years, they'll look at him the way that we looked at Dr. Andrews coming up. And so I was like, you are in the most capable of hands in what's wrong with your son. The reality is that, to me, let's think about, we talk about planning. Like you said, you want to be in California. Yep. I said, let's get an appointment. And you could already hear, we're set up for October. Fantastic. When did he suggest that there was going to be a surgery? In October. I said, well, listen, the biggest thing is I'm listening to everything you're saying. You wanted to make sure you got a plan. You want to stay on your timeline. It looks like we're going to fall into that. And everything we're talking about as I'm pushing stuff across you while we're on the foot, right here, I'm sending stuff across, is showing you that these procedures would only make, if in a God forbid situation or just not healing, set you up for success, because they're only going to accelerate the healing process, because everything's dealing with regenerating cells and stem health. And she was like, well, that's amazing. And you know what? Thank you so much for sharing, because I was really concerned about that. I said, so look at it as you're not losing, right? If he goes pain-free, inactive, and as a baseball player with chronic bicipital tendonitis, and he was a pitcher, now a catcher, he said something that really resonated. I said, well, listen, if you get him to pain-free in activities of daily living, he can do everything but there, then we're winning. Because right now he's got a level 3, level 4 pain all day long.
Right.
And so he's 15, 16 years old. That's unacceptable. Right. I mean, and he's already had a major surgery at that age. So if we can get him pain-free, but he can't perform, we've won. Mm-hmm. Because, I guarantee you, when that top surgeon looks in here and says, you know what, scar tissue's down or there, we're going to get to it. Now it's much easier and probably can target the problem and do a more precise result and get you where you want to be.
For sure.
So either way, the mom's immediate face was like, she lit up and she goes, thank you so much for listening. Yeah. And it was nice to hear that in the healthcare process, that we can offer an opinion and give them the insight. And I'm always citing my son. I said, my son's been through it with injuries and surgeries and whatnot. No, and he knows what it is. And then I'm not Dr. O'Connor anymore. I'm dad.
Right.
And in those moments, we scramble, we get rattled. And the way you like Ray Lewis, I love the Navy SEAL books. Mm-hmm. And that's where in parenting, because the immediate emotion, like having him down in the hurricane belt right now, is you got to detach and step back and say, okay, now I'm stepping back. I'm looking back into the situation. Emotional wants to go in and attack everything in the immediate area. Let me step back and say, hey, what's the best for him? Who's the best to be around him in this situation? And it just was unbelievable when I said that to her. She's like, you made this such a personal appointment. And they knew I was like, I care.
Yeah.
And that's what it's about. And I think that you resonate with that in your housing industry and the real estate community. And I love that about you.
You're in a service business. It's a people business. If you're not making those people happy, they're going to find somebody else to do business with. And your business is like mine. It's all built on referrals. Yeah, we can do social media. We can do paid advertising. But the right way to do this and the way it grows faster is by doing great jobs for people who then refer their friends, family, and just want to help grow your business. And that's the way you've done it, the way we've done it the same way.
Listen, absolutely love today. I think the last thing we're going to talk about in closing is, tell me one thing. What's your favorite drink?
Bourbon, straight on the rocks.
Next time we go on the podcast, we're going to toast off to a bourbon, and you tell me your favorite one.
Let's do it, man.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us today, DJ. Absolute pleasure.
Always good, man.
Your career is absolutely
just starting, man.
Just starting, and I love hearing more about this California thing. I think that's absolutely awesome.
Absolutely.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast. DJ Ten Hoeve and Ten Hoeve Realty is absolutely one of the best companies out there. If you're looking for real estate, that'll be on our storyline for today. You'll be able to find it and follow him. Follow him on Instagram or any of the social media platforms. I'm telling you, this man and his team are absolutely special. He won't disappoint. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, follow us, and we look forward to sharing more to you guys next week. Take care, and thank you.